Given the length of the agenda, I think we ought to start actually. Hey. Yeah, fine, thank you. And you? Right, well, good afternoon, everyone. I think we'd better make a start. We know that Joe's on stream and hopefully Kim will be joining us. And presumably, is it Lisa? Lisa will join us at some point. She's on. Right, better be careful then. Can I just first of all welcome Andrew Stone. Andrew is the head of customer relations at Borders to Coast, and you'll see that he's given us a presentation under agenda item 4. So apologies for absence. We've got Councillor Whittington, and hopefully Kim will be joining us. Any declarations of interest, please?
Yes, declaration
I think Rob's got that.
Yeah, sorry, my wife is a food member of the pension fund.
Okay. Item 3, minutes of the last meeting. Can I sign those as a correct record? Yes. I'll do that afterwards. Oh, they're there. Oh, you sneak them on. Yeah. I better just mention, probably this is the best place to do it. I was tasked with sharing that deep dive report. Do you remember the deep dive on Borders to Coast that we did with my fellow chairs of the Border to Coast? Well, I did that and tried through George Graham to have a meeting with my fellow chairs in Leeds, and kind of 3 ticked the box and said yes they would, so I abandoned it. You know, I could see no point, which was disappointing really. And I did get one comment back on the report from Gerard Moore which said good read, so can't do any more than that. So let's move on to item 4. So Borders to Coast Partnership, governance presentation, annual report and accounts. Are you introducing that, Claire?
Thank you. The board have previously considered arrangements at Border to Coast as part of their oversight responsibilities. Today, Andrew Stone from Border to Coast will present an update on current governance and management arrangements, the progress that pooling has made, and details of particular interest around responsible investing and savings generated by pooling. We also have, as part of this item, included the Border to Coast annual report and accounts. And if the board have any questions on this, Andy and I will help. We'll pick up these after the presentation. There's 45 minutes set aside today for Andy's presentation and any follow-up questions that the board might have. Therefore, I'll hand over to Andy to make a start.
Thanks, Claire. Can you hear me okay? Right, good, in that case. And have we got the presentation going up? Perfect. Right, thank you very much. So if we just flip over onto the page, firstly, thank you for having me along today. As you can see, I seem to have set myself a lot of bases to cover with this agenda. So we've got a background and governance arrangements, as Claire's already touched upon, and take you through our team progress today, what we're looking to try and do in future, some of Lincolnshire's investments, responsible investment in general at Borders to Coast, and an update on pool savings. More than happy to take questions as I go through this or wrap up anything at the end. So if we move forward onto page 4, if that's okay. So just in case you weren't aware, I'm sure you probably are, that these are your fellow partner funds across the Borders to Coast pool. So as you can see, there's a lot of competition for the best foliage-based logo for local councils in there. Obviously, Lincolnshire win that battle. So there's 11 partner funds in total with around £55 billion in assets overall, the majority of which we'd expect to move across to Border to Coast management over time. There'll always be perhaps some exceptions to that though. So that was a nice slide. If we go over onto the next one, I've got one that's horrible. This isn't one that I designed. It is very informative, though, I think. So I'll start with the easy bit, which is the text on the right-hand side, which are essentially our 7 guiding principles for pooling, which you might be familiar with. These all feature in our governance charter document, which is on our website. So obviously there's a focus on those government objectives for pooling at the outset, the likes of having responsible investment capabilities, ability to invest in infrastructure, providing value for money, etc. All partner funds get equal voting rights, regardless of size or investments in Border to Coast. Border to Coast provides all the building blocks for investment for the pool to use, but the partner funds retain governance and asset allocation decisions themselves. So we provide the building blocks, you decide how to utilise them or otherwise. Our aim is to improve net of fees risk adjusted performance. That's one for the longer term, definitely, but it's clear to say that we are certainly running some low fee and low risk funds within our portfolio of funds. And some of them look particularly good on a risk adjusted performance basis, including the UK listed equity one that you invest in. Internal management capability is a simple tick, as is having a shared team in one location when we're not disrupted by lockdown. And finally, which is a very important one in terms of pooling in general, is to have improved resilience and capacity. Now that's one I'm going to dig into a little later on later slides. So if we go over to another one with a lot of text, but a slightly nicer one to look at. So this is our house slide, and I think it's a fairly good stab at summing up Border to Coast in a single page. Yes, our key mission is to deliver cost-effective, innovative and responsible investment for our partner funds. But a key point is that this isn't just about launching funds, and I think you can really pick that out from this slide. It's worth just taking a step back and remembering that almost 3 years ago, when our first funds launched and I joined the company, I think there were only 15 members of staff there at the time. We've developed a whole company since then, effectively. So that means multiple business processes have been put in place. We built out the corporate and operational teams, created all those HR related elements, all the way through to getting an annual graduate program recruitment drive in place. And it's not just the case that we build the various features of our business and move on, of course, they all need frequent TLC. For example, we're regularly evolving the likes of our customer service and approach, our people development, etc. So if we move over the page, please, onto value add. I think it's worth just stopping to ask the question, when we refer to value, what do we actually mean here? I mean, there's a really obvious pounds and pence type of answer, but there's an awful lot more to consider when it comes to pooling. So the officers themselves, with assistance from Border to Coast, are always looking at opportunities for efficiency to pool resources or procurements and generally assist each other with the various undertakings that they have. I'll talk about pool savings more a little later on, but it's worth noting that there is an awful lot of nuance and ambiguity when it comes to cost savings and the costs incurred in relation to pooling. Quite simply, different partner funds have different views on this, as do different pools. Some of my colleagues have done a lot of work in collaboration with the partner funds on this in order to try and develop a standardised picture of this as far as is possible. Indeed, this is something that Border to Coast has actually led on across the local government pension scheme and in pooling. So cost savings is absolutely one key factor in pooling, but it's by far the be all and end all when it comes to value. So the question is, what are you actually getting for your money? I think it's very important to note that we built out a more robust investment team by pooling resources than would have been the case for individual partner funds. A good example of this was pulled out by the lead officer at South Yorkshire recently, when he noted that they used to employ Jane Firth, who came along to your committee meeting in this very room not so long ago. So Jane's ex-South Yorkshire. She's our head of responsible investment now. When she was at South Yorkshire, they obviously paid her salary. Half of it went to her working as a fund manager effectively, and half the time was spent on responsible investment matters. Now South Yorkshire benefit from Jane leading a 3-person full-time responsible investment team at Border to Coast for probably a lower price than they actually paid collectively for Jane's salary at that point in time. Not that I want to get into Jane's salary particularly. So we've undoubtedly got a broader investment team as well. It's not just about talented and experienced investment professionals, but also trying to bring together pooled risk management and investment resources as well, which is something that would have been beyond the capacity of individual partner funds prior to pooling. Succession planning is also a big thing too. We've got a bigger, broader team, different levels of experience, and it allows people to develop and move into new roles within the organisation, which is something that we're already seeing happening a couple of years in. I think, again, you can compare this to some of the better resourced partner funds prior to pooling, where even if they did have a strong investment team, there was quite a lot of cases where they had a very similar age demographic, and it wasn't towards the beginning of their career. I think they would have had some real challenges replacing people as they came up to retirement, especially trying to bring in experienced investment professionals on a budget outside the southeast of England or outside of Edinburgh. So that's something we've really helped with. Because in Leeds, there is a buoyant financial services industry. There's an awful lot of universities in the region, but it's not a traditional hotbed of fund management. So we're committed to growing our own investment professionals in the future, which is a key reason why we've built out our graduate programme. And finally on this, we've got collective voice. Essentially, big is beautiful in a sense. We get a louder voice with more assets under management, with more people within the pool. So we can use that within the industry for lobbying purposes, with central government as well. And it's very important in the key area of responsible investment, which we'll do a little bit more on later on. So if we move to page 9, please. So the team is now up to around 100 people from 15 a couple of years ago, as I mentioned. We had the slightly bizarre situation given COVID and our rapid growth that we managed to keep recruiting during lockdown. And I think there came a point where there was about 30 members of staff that I hadn't met in person at one stage. I think it's been largely rectified over the last couple of months now, which is good. So that notable increase in growth, it isn't empire building. We're not doing this for the sake of it. It's helping us to become a sustainable organisation for the wide variety of areas that we are already covering and all the different areas that our partner funds want us to get involved more and more in, both in terms of business as usual and future development. So, of course, as I've touched upon, we also need the nuts and bolts in place as a business, just like any other company does.
Andrew, can I just ask you a question on that?
Of course you can.
So at the conference, Chris Hitchins says, I think you're now up to 107.
Yeah.
Who actually, if you like, controls that budget? So is it Borders to Coast company, i.e. board,
Yeah,
or the joint committee, or a bit of both, or the section 151 officers?
so on an annual basis, we put forward a budget that has to be signed off by the partner funds. So I think that I can be taken apart on this, I think, but each partner fund tends to have their own way of doing this. I think quite often it goes via the section 151 officer. It might be chair or committee involvement as well to sign these off. So I think it can vary by organisation. So it has to be agreed with our shareholders. And from time to time, for example, if we're asked to do more or we're encountering particular difficulties in recruitment, for example, then we can ask for additional budget as well. But generally, it's built into an annual procedure that's agreed by everybody.
So you just can't, the 107, you couldn't just kind of go out and get another 8 on top of that without the either section 151 or whatever you're agreeing?
Yeah, I mean, we don't do it on a role by role basis necessarily. We'd set a budget for what we think we need and the people that we think we need to bring in. You know, if we're able to bring in 2 inexperienced members of staff, if we can't find an experienced member of staff for the same sort of role, say, then that's not something I don't think individual partner funds are going to get too upset about. But it is built into, you know, just our general plans for growth. And it's very, very unlikely we'd find budget for, say, an extra 6 people in a year without having cleared that at the start of the year.
And then just one final question from me and I'll shut up.
No.
So in terms of recovery, presumably you add something to the AMC, the annual management charge.
In terms of
recovering your income from the 11.
Okay. So at the moment, the way it works is we don't actually have an annual management charge in the sense that an asset manager would tend to, they tend to charge something like 0.1% of the assets under management. We don't do that at all at the moment. It's something that we are looking to instigate next year because it does seem to be perhaps a fairer way of dealing with the assets that we're managing and the split of costs for different partner funds. But as it stands, it all goes through the budget. So we are charging effectively based on what partner funds have told us that they do. So if they've suggested that they had a legacy position of £500 million in global equities, the gist is they're going to move that £500 million to border to coast, we'd be charging them on the basis that they do. And then when they bring that money in, then it obviously all works out quite nicely. So it's all just part of the annual budget at the moment.
I won't come. No, I said that was my last question. You carry on.
Okay. No, go for it if you want, honestly. I'm tired of listening to myself talk.
Well, that just seems a pretty cosy way of, to me anyway, seems a very cosy way of charging the 11 partners. But I don't know whether anybody else agrees. Maybe it's just me. But I don't know. Just seems a bit loose to me, that does.
I suppose
I'd assumed, you see, that you would have an AMC. But
yeah.
Obviously you're looking at that. So look, Andrew, don't. Otherwise I'll bog you down all afternoon. I'll tell you.
Well, final point on that. As I say, the AMC is something we'll try to instigate next year. We do have to be careful, though, because we're not a profit-making company. And that's something that we are seeking to avoid. So the AMC approach will have to be very carefully tailored so that profits aren't actually made. And I think it will be literally designed to cover costs rather than picking a flat amount and then trying to, actually making profits or loss on it. If that makes sense. It's strange. I'm used to being, my background's commercial asset management as well, so all of this is new to me, and it's interesting the challenges of trying to make it work on the cost front. That's not my job, so. Must have asked a few questions. My computer went to sleep there. Right, so let's flick over. So I thought I'd pull out a few people within our investment team. And it's just to give you, I'll be blunt, there are challenges with recruiting for a non-commercial asset manager outside of the southeast of England and Edinburgh. But we do seem to be doing pretty well at it so far. And sometimes it works out particularly well for certain individuals who've got great experience. Daniel Booth, our Chief Investment Officer, is hugely experienced, very knowledgeable, and he's also got experience of building up asset management capabilities essentially from scratch as well. He's done that setting up an alternative management capability for Saudi Aramco, where eventually he took over as head of the whole investment front of all of their portfolio management over there. So if he's done it in Saudi Arabia, he can do it in Leeds. He's got great contacts across the industry as well. Mark Lyon, who might be a familiar name to some, joined us from East Riding, where he was head of the fund there. He's a most senior investment team member from the LGPS side, so it's great to retain that type of experience and that type of culture as well. So Mark looks after our internal investment management team. Graham looks after external management. Essentially what that means is we have some funds, some which Lincolnshire invest in, where rather than run the assets, pick the stocks in-house ourselves, we actually appoint external asset managers to do that for us, where we don't necessarily have the capabilities or to meet the partner fund's preference in that respect. So Graham's got experience of CIO roles doing similar things at the likes of Aviva as well. It's worth noting that both Mark and Graham have lived in York for an awful long time, so having an asset management firm in Leeds is pretty convenient for both of them. Daniel also now lives in York, so it seems to be a bit of a hotbed for fund managers. Tim Sankey joined us last year to set up our real estate capability that we're developing and ultimately run that. Tim's got fantastic experience and is just a hugely knowledgeable guy from his time at Aberdeen Standard, and he's very much attracted by the opportunity of pooling and the possibility of running what might become the largest real estate fund in the UK if the assets that we're expecting come in the door. And Sarah Jane Burns is our head of research. So Sarah Jane spent much of her career in London and the US, but she had moved back to her native county Durham. So again, a large asset manager in Leeds worked out very well for Sarah Jane. And she seems to be really enjoying mentoring the graduates. She's been instrumental in our graduate programme and helping to get some of the researchers up to speed there. I've got a little bit on progress with a couple more unwieldy slides. So if we hop onto page 12, this seems to be just a concatenation of all my worst slides, I think, that are basically unreadable, so sorry for that. I hate putting too much on a slide, but this was part of a challenge to try and include everything that Border to Coast have ever done and will potentially do on one page. I ended up having to split the investment and corporate programme though, so I came up with 2 awful slides and I didn't even meet the objective. So what we can see on this is the 10 investment capabilities that we've launched to date, plus the assets under management attached to them. I say you can see it if you can see it. It's soon to be 11 with multi-asset credit launching in the next couple of weeks. And stretching out in front of us are the various fund reviews and possible future fund launches that we have lined up. It's worth noting that the future fund schedule is a result of collaboration with all our partner funds as to what they need, plus ensuring that there's a business case and sufficient interest for any possible capabilities we're developing. And we'll touch upon the ones that we understand Lincolnshire have a particular interest in later on in the pack. So the fund launch schedule is, of course, a very tangible and viable, visible aspect of what we do, but it is important to note the amount of work we do in areas such as responsible investment, though. We've got a little bit on this later as well, but it's essentially become routine now for us to be talking 20, 30 minutes at each committee meeting about responsible investment. We developed our first standalone climate change policy this year, recently set our net zero carbon objectives as well. And I don't want to call it a hot topic because it feels like a weak pun, but there's just such a huge amount of interest in this area and a vast amount of work being generated in it. And over the page onto our corporate development programme, I've alluded to the fact that it's not just all about investment. And I think this really does just ram home how much work that goes on that you might not necessarily see the fruits of. We've built out our office. We've now expanded onto a 2nd floor in the building, which is really, really useful for hybrid working going forwards. As I'm sure you'll have known from doing, if you did any hybrid meetings 2 years ago, hearing people in the room, if they weren't sat in the exact same spot facing the screen, used to be a nightmare. But all the rooms are set up really, really well, and that's working nicely for our model. Or if we have partly hybrid or remote work meetings with our customers as well. We developed all those business-wide operating models, as I've said. We ran an annual conference, of course, just the other week. That was online last year, so it was good to get a physical one back up and running again. We've been producing an AAF report for the last couple of years. We've moved on to the more involved Type 2 reporting now. That's essentially an internal audit of our business controls and the way that we work. Developing strategy in various areas of the buildings and also of the business, and also adhering to all those nasty regulatory requirements that we have to bear in mind as a regulated asset manager. Is it worth pausing? Happy to take any questions that might have come up before moving on to the next section, or if not.
Any questions?
I'll carry on then in that case. So if we pop onto page 15, this is the first one on your funds before we move on to responsible investment. And this really is just bringing together your investments with Border to Coast in one place. So the funds that you're invested in with us, UK listed equity, is internally run by our in-house portfolio management team. It's relatively low risk, aiming to outperform the FTSE All-Share Index by 1% per annum over rolling 3 years periods, just past its third birthday, and is broadly in line with that target, just a couple of percentage points short of it. Global Equity Alpha is your other equity fund with us. Excuse me. This is one of our external funds, so it's a higher return seeking fund aiming to outperform its benchmark by 2% per annum. And what we've done with this is appointed 5 external fund managers who essentially fish in different ponds for their return sources. So the approach here is to avoid putting all your eggs in one basket style-wise. He says mixing his metaphors. So this fund got off to a tricky start, having launched, I think it was 3 weeks before COVID was discovered in Wuhan. So it faced some headwinds over the first year, particularly given 1 or 2 of the managers that we had in the blend. But since then, the last year has been very promising. The fund's positive, it's above its benchmark, but not quite at its performance objective yet. So we hope it can pull that back around over the next year. And finally, the bond fund that you invest in us to date, before our multi-asset credit fund also launches, is our investment grade credit. It's another externally managed fund. It involves 3 external managers of complementary styles as well, seeking a more modest outperformance of its benchmark of 0.6% per annum, which is largely representative of bonds being a less volatile asset class than equities. It has got off to a flying start, however, with the managers being able to take advantage of some opportunities in credit markets. And I think it's about 1.7% above its benchmark at the end of Q2, now about 18 months old, that fund. So that's what you've got. And over the page, we have, thank you, some of the things that we understand are of interest to you. Well, multi-asset credit we know very well because you're investing in it when it launches in the next couple of weeks. So this has been designed to give access to a wide range of credit assets, to diversify risk and return sources across the globe. So we call it a best of both worlds approach. We've appointed a core manager that will largely take more active asset allocation decisions across different markets, and a series of sector specialists as well. So we've got sector specialists in areas such as high yield bonds, emerging market debt, etc. Alternative investments, we've been running our funds for about 2.5 years now. Lincolnshire have been hanging on for a bespoke solution that we're looking to build for them that will hopefully replace the existing Morgan Stanley mandate. So you're looking for something that's more integrated than our current approaches, that manages cash flows, takes into account asset allocation decisions, etc. So we'll hopefully have you invest in our next series of alternatives capabilities when they launch in April next year, and then subsequently we'll develop and fine-tune that solution for you and bring it all together in one place. And finally, I've touched upon real estate already. We're developing global real estate for a late 2022 launch, and the UK capability should follow about a year or so later. Okay, we've got responsible investment up next over the page. So truncating the usual 5 or 10 pages on this into one, so I'll just pull out the highlights of it. What we're showing here are essentially the 4 pillars of responsible investment at Border to Coast and how we manage this. So starting on the left, we have active ownership. Now, what we mean by this is voting on company resolutions and engaging with companies in key areas. So sometimes that's in collaboration with other large asset owners and industry initiatives. So when it comes to moving towards a more sustainable world, we strongly believe that this is the most appropriate route. You need to have skin in the game in order to effect change. Just selling all your holdings in oil and gas may clean up your portfolio, but it certainly doesn't particularly have any impact on the world in general. ESG integration into our investment processes. It always feels useful to say that this isn't tree hugging, it's not an ethical decision. There's a huge amount of financial value in the decisions that companies make when it comes to environmental, social and governance matters. So it can be things like stranded fossil fuel assets, it could be poor supply chain practices, it can be bonuses based on targets that aren't challenging enough. All of these things detract from shareholder value if they're not monitored correctly. When it comes to external managers, any mandates that we give out to them, we heavily weave their approach to responsible investment into the selection process at the outset. And any successful managers are carefully monitored by our team over time. We challenge them on aspects that don't ring true to what they told us at the outset, what they told us in the request for proposal. And aside from our fund managers regularly speaking to them, Jane Firth and her team have an annual in-depth meeting with each of our external managers as well. And all this probably wouldn't be that much good if we didn't tell you about it. So we do a lot of reporting already, and it's only expanding. You can have a look on our website if you don't believe me. So we share details of our voting and engagement activity, including examples. We produce annual reports as well as quarterly, and we've recently started sharing our ESG and carbon reporting more widely with officers so that they can share this with their committees. Now, this shows the positive positions that our funds have taken in this respect, while also being careful to tell the story of any high emitting stocks that we hold in our portfolios. As alluded to earlier, just dropping an oil company because they're an oil company isn't the right answer if they're a good investment. We need energy for the transition to a renewable future, and these are the companies that we need to drive those transition stories. We need them to develop the renewable solutions of the future. So finally, we've got a page on pooling savings on that one. Thank you. So I think Claire will, I understand, know all about this from conversations with James Green. So questions to Claire on this one. There's a project that's been undertaken to state individual partner fund and total savings across our pool, which has involved Border to Coast and the partner funds. It's worth pointing out that in our own reporting accounts, we don't include individual partner fund specific savings, just the consolidated position. However, we have tried to assist partner funds with their own individual cost savings to feed into their own reporting accounts. And we'll seek to continue to update that over time to reflect changing experience and views on asset flows into Border to Coast. I think James Green's already annoying you about Q3 figures, isn't he? He told me earlier this week. So, of course, we expect potential savings from pooling to keep growing as we launch further capabilities over time. And speaking to my colleague James, who's very much at the coalface of this work, he noted that Lincolnshire are currently looking at total savings of, I think, £10 million cumulative up to the end of 2031-2032 financial year. And that doesn't take account of potential asset flows into future fund launches, aside from a multi-asset credit fund, which is about to launch. I said a little bit earlier about Border to Coast work to standardise pooling costs earlier on. It's also worth mentioning that the pools are looking at making value for money comparisons using a balanced scorecard approach as well. And that's to capture or to try and capture some of those broader benefits of pooling that you can't necessarily just put a pound and pence figure on. That's something that's not easy to get a consensus on either, though. We're the only pool that offers in-house asset management teams, in addition to having external managers running our funds. So it's difficult to compare apples and apples with other pools on that basis. And it's fair to say that one of the pools, who shall remain nameless, follow a much looser definition of pooling than some of the others. Arguably haven't changed their approach that much from the legacy arrangements. Therefore, they might not be so keen to participate in such value for money comparisons. So I think it's just useful to keep all of these points in mind when you see costs and savings figures banded around to compare pooling experiences. And of course, pooling's been around for 3 years or so now. So it's no doubt only a matter of time until the performance of the various funds that different pools run in will start getting publicised as well. So that will be thrown in alongside the costs of the exercise and some of the broader, less tangible benefits as well. That's everything I had. I'm more than happy to take any questions though.
Jerry? Should be a red light.
Can we not notice now? And I think we asked this question when we did the accounts, I must admit, but I can't remember what the allocation of the pooling savings, how you allocate the savings, I must admit. It's just how they're calculated, and if they are allocated by fund, I just can't quite envisage how that's done. I know it was a question that came up when we looked at the accounts last time, but you just give a bit more detail on that, Claire. Thanks.
I was struggling to hear it. I think it's
sorry. The question is, I can't remember. Have the savings in the accounts, are they split by fund? Is the actual fund savings shown, or are they the consolidated savings? And secondly, how are they calculated both generally and by fund? Because I find it difficult to see how they can be allocated by fund. I find that almost impossible to conceive how that's done.
Shall I have a go and you can join in as well? So I can't remember offhand in the report and accounts whether we've broken it down by individual capability. We only show it for the fund as a whole, though I've seen the breakdown of figures that our team has shared with Claire and some of the other and all of the other partner funds as well. And it is broken down in terms of the cost savings for each individual fund. And it's not just the funds as well, that there are other cost savings in relation to things like being able to cross trades with other partner funds, which is something that Lincolnshire's benefited from over the last year as well. So obviously all of these things are based on a series of assumptions that I think James has tried to make clear in everything that he shared as well. So yeah, for example, we're basing it on any legacy management costs that we've been given by partner funds prior to pooling. We're looking at what our own cost basis is and applying costs based on the way I think, you know, we're running the budgets at the moment at Border to Coast. More useful to add to that as well.
No, I think that's a fair assessment of it. I think the only thing that I would add to that is we have counted savings or additional costs only where we've made a like-for-like investment with Border to Coast. So, for example, the Global Equity Alpha Fund, where we had 3 managers previously who were providing a very similar product. So the cost of Border to Coast and those funds are included as our savings. But the move that we made into the UK listed equity was from a purely passive fund with LGIM, and we're not including any savings or additional costs for that because it isn't a like-for-like movement. So those savings and costs captured are purely on a like-for-like basis within there.
I mean, seeing the staff numbers earlier, obviously they're growing quite a lot. I mean, presumably that those savings take account of all, and that's what the Border Coast costs are, I suppose, is the staff costs of running those investments. So it's obviously taking into account the number of staff that Border Coast have got and the allocation of that to Lincolnshire.
Yeah, so things like governance costs, which we're picking up 1/11th now each. So costs that we wouldn't have incurred prior to pooling, they're all built into those costs and savings analysis. So as far as possible, where we can make reasonable comparisons, then they are being made.
As I mentioned at the last meeting, I think that the transitioning costs, I think some of those, I can't buy those at the present time, but you know, that's probably a discussion we'll have some other time, because I think LGIM could easily do that for you, you know, if we'd have been as we were on our own. So I think that is an exaggeration of the savings. That's a personal view. Do you want to, are you happy to take questions on your accounts?
I can't profess to be an expert on the chapter and detail of the accounts. I'm more than happy to take questions if.
Well, I know Jerry's got one, which actually might be an omission. I don't know whether it is. No.
seem to be coming on this thing. The question was, yeah, the shareholdings, 100% shareholdings in these subsidiary companies. The one subsidiary company not mentioned was Lincolnshire. So that was a question, yeah.
And there is a very valid reason for that. Those general partners were set up or have been set up for making investments in private markets, so in private equity infrastructure. Lincolnshire isn't included on that list yet because, as Andy mentioned earlier, we haven't made any investments into alternatives yet. So I would imagine for the set of accounts from 1st of April 2022, if that's the date that Lincolnshire move into getting Border to Coast to manage alternatives for them, then there will be a GP set up for Lincolnshire as well.
Oh, so the companies are set up specifically as a platform to make the investment.
Yeah, so they've been set up to facilitate effective deployment of partner fund capital into that. I presume there are some tax implications which they manage most effectively on that basis.
Anything from you, Dave? No? No. Can I just ask a couple of questions? I don't know whether it's you, Andrew, or Claire. I noticed the share capital went up. Was there a reason we went up from 10 million to 13?
I can pick that up if that's all right. I think it's simply the size of the company. So the regulated share capital was calculated at a specific value of the company, and then as the investments that have been made on all of our behalves has increased, then that level has had to increase. We've seen two increases. The first one was with the merger of Northumberland and Tyne and Wear, where obviously all the funds had to put a little bit more in, but then the second increase was overall to that level.
Yep, okay. Anything else on the presentation or the accounts?
I suppose just one last point would be on the alternatives, with that in mind. And alternatives has always been one of the key areas in which the LGPS funds were expected to benefit hugely from pooling. It's a difficult area. There are layers of fees that commercial asset managers charge, and a lot of arrangements mean that you are employing effectively one manager to allocate money to other managers, such as the level of due diligence and expertise needed to assess those opportunities properly. By doing that with a non-commercial asset manager in-house, by having a team that does that, we're able to remove, I think, significant layers of fees, avoid investing in certain expensive fund-of-fund vehicles as well. So hopefully you'll see material additional savings coming through in future projections from investing in the alternatives proposition.
I guess the only one I've got, Andrew, and you probably won't be able to answer this. I ought to have a conversation with Chris Hitchens, but from a pure governance angle, I still worry, have concerns about two, if you like, councillors being on the Border to Coast board as NEDs. That just didn't rest comfortably with me at all. And I know it's a Chris Hitchin initiative, and I really ought to talk to him so that he can explain to me why he thinks it's good. I think it's good for him as the board, but not necessarily for the 11 partner funds. But that is very much a personal view. I struggle on that one. And I know that Lincolnshire we wouldn't nominate anyone to the board.
I don't know. I mean, I do some work with the board from time to time, and I think I find it useful personally to be able to get those insights and just have things from a different perspective and understand the partner fund view and have that feed into the board. Is there any particular reason, or is it just more of a general feeling?
Well, at its extreme, if one or more of the partner funds lost confidence in the board, or and I'm not saying, I'm always looking for the the unknowns. then let's say we wanted to get rid of Rachel, then I just think that those two might have some difficulty. That's very much a personal view, and you know, I don't want anyone kind of coming back and saying, well, why did you agree to that? It's, you know, it just doesn't sit comfortable with me from a governance angle, and I guess it doesn't fit comfortably with Lincolnshire County Council, because we will not nominate a Ned to that role. We're too pure in Lincolnshire, you see.
Thanks for sharing. It's useful to hear that, though.
But as I say, just to conclude it, and I know it's a Chris Hitchin initiative in his kind of very early days as chairman, and I must take him at one side and just let him explain it to me over a drink sometime. Anything else on this one? No? Well, thanks ever so much, Andrew, for coming along and giving us the presentation and answering the questions. Very good. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Sorry. The recommendation is the board is asked to note the report, presentation and annual report and accounts. Happy with that? Agree? Yes. Thank you. Pension fund update. Is that Joe? Oh, it's Lee. It's Joe. I'm going to say. Cheers then. Thanks. So this is Joe. Ah, Joe. You've got a fantastic background there. I wanted to say that this morning, but nobody else.
Whitby Nature Park.
It looks as though you're outside.
Wishful thinking.
Blowing.
Wishful thinking. Can you hear me?
Yes, fine.
Yeah. Just to say, I did just want to add to the last comment. I put my hand up, my virtual hand up, but that doesn't seem to be working, that you can see that. So if you're happy, if I've got a comment I'd like to make, are you happy for me just to put my microphone on and say, please, can I comment? Because it's a bit difficult with this hybrid working way.
Of course, yeah.
And it was just to say, really, you're absolutely right in that Lincolnshire have decided not to put forward anyone. And it's more to do with the potential conflict of interest. So we had discussions with Andrew and David Coleman as monitoring officer. And it's about how a councillor that is always looking in the best interests of either the pension fund on the pensions committee or of the council could manage that conflict of interest in then having to look at the best interests of the company as a board member. So that just to explain the reasoning behind why we can't see Lincolnshire putting somebody forward for one of those NED positions.
So when I have my drink with Chris Hitchin, I can add to it.
Yeah, I could, if it would help, I could ask Chris if he could give you a call to discuss that at some point. We could set that up.
Yeah, I see him from time to time at various pension seminars, so don't worry. I'll if I've not sorted it before Christmas, I've not seen him, then I'll let you set it up in 2022.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right, so if I start on paper 5 then, so this is just the standard quarterly paper. And
sorry, I got Dave.
Yes, sorry, just before we move from that point of NEDs, Lincolnshire, are we, as a fund, are we on our own of this view, or is it more of a wider view within the pool, within the border to coast? I'm just thinking, are we standing alone here, or are we in with other funds who have got a similar concern?
We're not on our own. I don't think anyone's vocalised their view perhaps as much as we have. But looking at nominations for the last lot of NEDs, there were very few. I think they were basically the two that are currently there. So it's I think there's a lot of hoops that some of the councils are having to jump through to be able to put somebody forward. I think probably the majority are in agreement with them being on there because they feel the value that keeping that public sector culture and ethos in the company and ensuring the board understands that, they feel is very helpful on the governance side. So I think we're probably kind of at one end of the spectrum. There are some that are more in the middle, and then there are some that are very much for it.
The question I suppose really I'm asking is as well, is that bearing in mind there are 2 NEDs, in order for there not to be, have we got to change the whole corporate sort of way in which the board operates to change it? It's not about just not voting them on, it's about not having them at all. It would be
a shareholder decision. So it was initially a shareholder decision to create those 2 non-executive posts. And if the partner funds decided that they didn't want them there anymore, then they would have to raise that as a resolution after discussion with the company and put forward a resolution to remove those posts. They would then require to have additional non-executive directors to ensure that there were enough NEDs there to be able to fulfil the duties that are required of the board.
Right. Okay, Joe. Agenda item 5.
Sorry, I can't see you when I'm speaking, so it's very hard if anyone's trying to get my attention. Apologies. So this is, as I say, just the normal paper, and there's just a few areas that I'd like to bring to your attention. So section 1 on page 93 and the appendix on page 99 show how the fund meets the requirements of TPR. Amber area at B12, which I mentioned at the last meeting, hopefully we'll move back to green by the end of the year. So all new committee members should by then have completed their toolkit training within the 6-month window that's set out in the annual training policy. Paragraphs 1.3 to 1.6 show the progress of the TPR's new combined code of practice, which is now not expected to be effective until later in 2022. There's been some delay there. Section 2 on page 95 updates the board on any breaches that have occurred over the quarter. Late payment of contributions is on there as a regular item, and that's covered at report item 10. I haven't received a response from Prudential, but Lisa will provide the latest update in the pensions admin paper at item 7. Now, there was a question that Jerry asked.
Joe,
sorry.
Joe, just before we move on Prudential, I mean, the impression I got this morning from Lisa was that, you know, there's not much to report. I just did wonder whether, and this is me being mischievous, but I didn't know whether we should write to whether Eddie, for example, should write, or whether I should write to the pensions regulator and say, look, this is not good enough. What are you doing? Because I just get the impression that they're just monitoring the situation. And, you know, there might have been a bit of improvement, but not a lot of improvement. And as I mentioned this morning, if this had been a small pension scheme, they would have been pilloried by the regulator. And yet Prudential, to me, just seemed to be getting away with it.
Happy to facilitate that. I don't know, I would say the TPR haven't been particularly forthcoming in telling us what they're doing. You know, the response that Lisa said is pretty much all we've had. Prudential are not, I emailed them I think about 4 weeks ago for an update. I've chased it since and I've still heard nothing back. So the client relationship there is suffering considerably. As I said, there have been improvements, and the actual impact on our members has been few and far between, given the number of members that we have. And West Yorkshire have ensured that nobody has gone into any financial difficulty, and that they're able to pay out a portion of any lump sums or pensions in advance of getting them their full figures, whilst waiting for Prudential to do their bit of work. So happy to facilitate that if it would help. I don't know how much it will, because all funds are suffering, you know, Prudential have the majority of the LGPS funds with their AVCs. So there's been a lot of pressure from a number of funds, but there still doesn't appear to be any improvement. But say happy to facilitate that. Letters from either yourself or Councillor Strengle or both.
Andrew, do you think we should take a view? Do you think we should write, or is it? I don't know whether this is mentioned in SCT circles.
Yeah, so I'm going down with Michelle actually to Warwick in a couple of weeks. So I was anticipating giving a bit of an update on this later when we talk about the accounts, but can cover it now. I'm happy we invariably have a pensions update at that meeting. So they generally bring somebody in to have a discussion about it. So it will naturally come up, I suspect. So I'm happy to take that into that sort of sphere and report back and wonder whether there's a joint a joint piece that can be undertaken. But for me, communicating regularly with bodies such as the regulator, there's no bad thing in doing that, even if it's just on our own. And I'll probably say the same later when we talk about the accounts.
Joe, I think tactically, let's just see what Andrew brings back from the SCT annual meeting, and then dependent on that, we might decide to write, assuming the board agree. Okay.
Yeah, I think actually what Andrew said there, if there was able to be a joint communication, that would probably hold a lot more weight than just Lincolnshire on its own.
Sorry, can I just ask a follow-up question, purely from a scheme member's point of view? I mean, at the point of retirement, when the AVC should be crystallised into a benefit, I mean, that's part of the problem, and it's probably the most important part to get resolved. But ongoing monthly, the contributions that are deducted, the AVCs that are deducted from pay, from salary, from that, they're being paid over still to the Prudential, I'm assuming. So they're being paid over within the framework of the 19 days after and all of that requirement. But they're not, the contributions are not being allocated to their personal account, I'm assuming. So that's been missed. So the whole system is at fault, isn't it? That it's not just the fact that it's at retirement, it's going back to a contributing member. I mean, is that appreciated by the regulator? They do know that it's a total system failure. It's not just a few members here and there. I mean, this is thousands of members of the local government scheme, isn't it, that are being impacted by a system failure.
Yes, and that's been made very clear in the reports that were put forward to TPR. I mean, Prudential's response to that is that when they are allocating, they're allocating to the date that they should have put that money in. So no member will lose out. They will be given any benefit in having had that invested at the correct time, or any loss, because it works both ways. The view seems to be, well, we're putting it right eventually. I mean, Lisa gave a better update this morning, and we'll be able to give her a better update from kind of the coalface, as it were, as to what the member services team are actually seeing on a day-to-day basis. I must admit, I think there's probably only been 2 complaints that have reached my team about this. That then, when raising, we're generally able to get them to jump to the front of the queue. But it's a national issue for Prudential. Obviously the council itself had issues when it introduced its own system a few years ago. So there is a slight bit of sympathy there in understanding how wrong IT changes can go when they do go wrong. But yeah, it's difficult to know what more pressure we can put on Prudential. I mean, even if they aren't getting things working properly, they should at least be communicating better with us so we're able to understand and let our membership know, which is probably one of my biggest bugbears as well with them. But I do think that that would be a really good idea if Andrew can raise that at that meeting, and say perhaps a weightier response coming from a number of pension funds may hold more sway with pensions regulator.
Yeah, we'll do that, Joe. Okay.
So if I can just go back to, there was a question that Jerry raised about whether or not this risk should have been put onto the risk register as a red risk. We haven't put it there because actually it's not a material issue given the number. I think we've only got within the active membership about 800 of our 25,000 members have actually got AVCs. So it's a handful of members that are being impacted on the payout side. Obviously, those members where it's not being allocated should not see that impact unless they're actually looking to retire. So no, I don't believe it should be a red risk at this point, because things are being, as I say, most members are not impacted at all in what they see, because it's all being made good. I don't know if the board are happy with that explanation.
Yeah, I think the only comment I'd make is the length of time it seems to be taking to resolve it. You know, if and the concern, it's red risk because there's a concern that they're not going to sort it out. I mean, I'm sure they will, but well, hopefully they will. But it's a concern, the length of time and the communication we're getting. That's the reason. So I appreciate, in some senses, from a materiality point of view, I understand that. But obviously, over time, if it's not sorted out, it does become a red risk, doesn't it? If it isn't sorted.
Yeah, I think when we're looking at putting kind of risk ratings, we have to look at the likelihood of something happening and then the impact of that happening. So the likelihood is, well, it is happening. So actually it's an issue as opposed to a risk anyway. But the impact, as I say, is actually very small. And for those individuals working with West Yorkshire, they're able to give them funds to tide them over until the full payments can be made. So just in how risks are scored, it's very important to those individuals that are having that issue, but are still in the scheme of things for the pension fund, I wouldn't see it as a red risk.
I'm bound to say, Joe, that I'm with Jerry on this one. I mean, let's say this turns into a TSB issue and Prudential, it takes a year. I mean, if I was if I was coming up to retire and I'd got a big AVC fund and I couldn't get my money the day after I retired, I wouldn't be very happy. But at the end of the day, you know, the risk register is yours, but I'm with Jerry on this one. I'd be putting it red.
To be often, they very rarely get it the day after they retire, because if they've paid right up till the point they retire, then final information has to be received, paid over, final salary calculated, etc. So there is always a time scale between somebody retiring and getting their payment. So particularly if, say, we remind people with AVCs to try and stop them at least a couple of months before they retire to try and reduce the delay, but it is never immediate because of the information that has to be got that can't be obtained until after that person has finished work and payments paid across. So there is always a delay there anyway.
Well, I'm sure we're not going to go to the wall on the risk register. We've raised the issue of potential.
If I may say, Joe, my only issue on this is that, and it's what you're saying, Jerry, it's the lack of communication that bothers me as much here. That it's as though the Prudential are just burying their head and closing their ears, really. I'm not saying they're not aware, but they do seem to be less than sort of engaged in getting a solution. It's been going on now. How many minutes? It was raised at the last board meeting and it goes before then. So we must be into 4 to 5 months since this issue was highlighted for the first time. So it's the length of time and the lack of communication coming back from the Prudential and even from the regulator that is as a concern, purely looking at it from a member's perspective, that it needs to be better, doesn't it? Or it needs to be seen to be better, in my view. But I'm not going to say it needs to be red, but I'm a bit anxious that time is passing.
Yeah, it has. It was the beginning of the year, earlier in the year, that they brought in this new system. I mean, we will continue to chase to try and contact. One of the difficulties that, I spent, I think it was about nearly an hour and a half on the phone to them before the last meeting to try and get an update. But they won't speak to me. They just tell me that I have to speak to somebody in Lincolnshire Pension Fund, which is rather difficult. It's not that we're not continuing to chase up on this and look at it. As I say, working with West Yorkshire, and it's been raised also at conferences and discussions that I've been at, because I say this isn't just a Lincolnshire issue, it is a much wider issue. So we will continue to do that. But it's how we get TPR to, I think it probably requires their input to be able to make Prudential do anything differently. We seem to have quite a quiet voice on this. Unfortunately, they're not hearing us.
Jerry, final word.
Final question. Yeah, just a basic question. It is on the risk register, is it? So I was looking if we had a copy of that. Obviously, we haven't. So is it actually on the risk register, and is it rated amber?
It's not on the risk register as an individual issue. As I say, it would be on the issue register, but it's not on there. As I say, given its the impact of it and the materiality. I mean, I can put it on there, but as I say, because it's not on there doesn't mean that it's not on our radar, and that we're not still actively looking to get this resolved.
Sorry, all I was going to say, I mean, sorry, I'm looking just to flag it, that we are, as a board, aware, but I suppose it's minuted, isn't it? We've got a record of our discussions. Whether it's on the register or not, does that enhance it?
The board can recommend to the head of pensions and the pensions committee that they actually put it on the risk register. We could do that, and we've done that before. Yeah.
I'm just looking at, but I'm not suggesting one or the other. I'm just saying that we are aware. Does it need to be registered as a risk?
From a self-protection point of view, yes. Yeah. Is Kim on the line? Kim, do you have a view on this, please?
I think it probably needs to be noted somewhere, but as you say, it's an ongoing risk, so it's not a future risk. So I'm not sure where it would sit.
Well, what do you want to do? Are we going to suggest to or recommend to the pensions committee they include this on the risk register? I think we should.
I think we should, because it is a future risk, because we've got no communication saying it's been resolved, really, have we? I mean, if they said it's been sorted next week or next month, then maybe not. But given that it seems to be, I mean, obviously it'll come off the risk register when it's sorted, but I think it should be on there, even if it is classed as not red, which I understand Joe's view on that, certainly. So.
Yeah, I will. Sorry, Roger. I'll
right.
I'll support that. I'll support that.
Right, we'll do that then, please.
Yeah, we'll take that forward as a recommendation then to the December committee.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Crack on then.
Thank you. So section 4 on page 95 is an update of what's been happening with Border to Coast. So you've just had the information from Andy there. We haven't made any new investments over the quarter, but we will very soon be doing the multi-asset credit transition. So that will be done within the next few weeks. Joint committee was held on the 30th of September. And I shared the papers with you on the 22nd. If you do have any questions or comments or feedback you'd like to give to the Joint Committee, please contact Councillor Strengle, and then he can raise those for you at the next meeting, which is on the 23rd of November. And just an update on the shareholder resolution that I mentioned on there. We've now had full approval from all shareholders for the additional resources for the development of the real estate funds. That's all that I was going to say, so I'll happily take any questions. Thank you.
Joe, sorry, it's a bugbear of mine, and I'm sure you've sent it to me before. The training policy, have I seen that? Because I still have this problem with training, how specific it is, because you can't, other than the toolkit, which I know obviously we've all done. I don't know how specific it can be, but anyway, the question I suppose is that If I have had a copy of the training policy issued before, could you just flag it up to me, or could I have a copy of the training policy?
Yep, we can get that email to you again, Jerry, not a problem.
Anything else? No. If not, in terms of the recommendation is the board consider and note the report, that's okay. The board will recommend to the pensions committee that we include Prudential as a on the risk register, and that also Andrew and I will liaise the Prudential issue to the SCT, and if necessary, we'll draft them a letter for the SCT to send. Yeah, happy with that? Yep. Thank you. Let's move on to item 6, which is responsible investment update. That's you, Claire, isn't it?
It is, thank you. The report brings to the board details of the fund's responsible investment activity during the last quarter. The report details activity which has been undertaken by the fund and organisations that the fund is a member of and uses to undertake RI activity on its behalf. The first section of the report sets out details of the work undertaken by the Local Authority Pension Fund Forum, LGPS, and paragraph 1.3 of the report details the work they've undertaken during the quarter. This includes company engagement, collaborative engagement, working on raising sector concerns, supporting sector-wide initiatives and responding to consultations, all on behalf of its members. Further information on their activity can be found in their quarterly engagement report. The next section covers the work of Border to Coast. Each quarter they publish their RI activity, and this can be found on their website. A link is contained within the report for this, but the highlights are set out at paragraph 1.6 and include the publishing of their stewardship report and their TCFD report for the year 2021. In addition to the work undertaken directly by Border to Coast, they have also appointed Robeco to act as reporting, voting and engagement services. For the first quarter of 2021, they've attended shareholder meetings and voted at company AGMs for Border to Coast funds, engaged with companies on issues including corporate governance, environmental management and human rights. Again, there's a link to their quarterly report in the paper. The next section of the report sets out voting activity for shares held by the fund, and these relate to UK equities and global equities managed by Border to Coast. The next section of the report looks at the Financial Reporting Council's new stewardship code. The fund had signed up originally to the 2012 code, however in 2020 the FRC released a new stewardship code. This has 12 principles which the fund must apply and explain, and it focuses very much on stewardship activities and outcomes from those activities, whereas the old code was very much focused on organisations having appropriate policies and procedures in place. To become a signatory to the code, the fund must submit to the FRC a stewardship report demonstrating how they've complied over the previous 12 months. And the fund has submitted a report for the period 1st of April 2020 to 31st of March 2021. And this is in time for the next reporting deadline, which is at the end of October. The report plus comments from the FRC will be shared with the board at a future meeting when they're received. The final section of the report looks at the fund's investment and responsible investment beliefs. At the training session in September, it was agreed that these beliefs would be reviewed in advance of the investment strategy review and the triennial valuation review, and that training will be held in February. That was all I wanted to say, but I'm very happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you, Claire. Any questions? Kim, any questions? Silence. Are you happy to note?
No, thank you.
Okay, Kim, thank you. Are you happy to note the report and discuss the responsible investment activity undertaken during the quarter? Yeah. Thank you. So, item 7, which is the pensions admin report, and this is Lisa. Lisa.
Hello.
Hi, Lisa.
Hiya. Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Afternoon, everyone. So this is the quarterly report of the Funds Administrator West Yorkshire Pension Fund. Just to go through each section, looking at our performance and benchmarking. We've met all our key performance indicators within this quarter, either attaining or exceeding them on all aspects of the benchmarking on the areas listed within the table. Scheme information in point 2 gives an update of the membership numbers as well as the age profile of the scheme and the employer activity within the period April to June, with a total number of employers now being 296. That's been an addition total of new employers of 3, 2 academies and 1 parish council. Over the quarter, April to June, we received 96 Lincolnshire members sample survey letters were sent out, and out of them 10 were returned. Therefore, it gives us the customer satisfaction survey. Appendix A attached to the report shows all the customer surveys returned. Within section 3.2, we have a list of the employer training that we've been doing. Over the quarter, April to June, we are still doing online training through webcasts and will continue to do so for the foreseeable future. One of the good ways of doing the webcasts and the webinars is that we managed to get employers across all 4 funds that we actually administer the pension scheme for, rather than have to go to localised offices or buildings to be able to present. And we've had a much better attendance over this quarter and for the last few months on our webcasts and webinars, because it is much more inclusive of everyone across the country. So the training covered a number of various areas, including the pension statements, blocks and quarantines and forms, and understanding various different areas for term time only members. Section 4, internal dispute resolutions. Stage 1 appeals, no appeals currently outstanding at stage 1. A couple of appeals of stage 1 against scheme employers, and both of those have been referred back to the scheme employer, and we're waiting for information back from them. Stage 2 appeals, we have no cases and none under the Ombudsman. So coming to number 5 on the administration update, as previously covered by Joe as well, I'll just give you the kind of salient points within the prudential and then answer the additional question, which I think with the discussions with Joe in the last section, there's been quite a bit of that covered. We have been in touch with Prudential, and we encourage, we are looking to keep in contact with Prudential, but like Joe, are struggling to get any response back. I know we had a response back from our client manager, who said it had just been escalated to their head of service, and she couldn't give no further updates, but had sent our concerns to them. Still trying to get the benefit statements and information for reporting and accounts. They are promising that it will be in quarter 4 of 2021 that this information will be out, but again, still no definite confirmation of that. Because of the continuing issues, as I say, we have flagged this with the TPR, as have Lincolnshire and other people, and as we say, they're just coming back with the situation is being monitored accordingly. Any update that we get as the pension fund, we will pass on. We're still experiencing delays for some members, and I do have another update that I'll just go through in a minute. It's on another email, but there has been a slight improvement, and that's still coming through, that there has been a slight improvement. Prudential are also awarding members a payment of £175 for past service, distress and inconvenience, and as I say, we will continue to monitor that. An update I've received from the manager who deals with this area at West Yorkshire Pension Fund. Prudential are still experiencing delays with allocating contributions as a result of them moving on to this new software, and it is looking like it can take a couple of months to sort out, or longer if it's a tricky case. I don't know what constitutes a tricky case, but I think it's when they're struggling to allocate the contributions to somebody's account. As Joe says, they are making good that if they're not allocated, then they're given what they would have had they been allocated at the time they should have been. With regards to the retirement and deferred retirement cases, where we're waiting for payment of the ABC fund, we did have one member with 2 records where benefits were due August 2020, but that was actually a delay from the member, and we've only just been sent the claim forms and payment has been requested, so we're yet to see when that payment comes in. There was one case in April 2021, and the member returned their claim form again, not till the 14th of September. There were no outstanding cases between May and August. September 2021, retirements, there were 6 retirement cases, 3 have been paid and 3 are outstanding, but these were only requested in October, so we don't class them as late yet, as Joe said. If a member has paid AVCs right up to the last payment or the last wage of before retirement, we don't expect that the AVC payment is likely to come in within 1 to 2 months anyway, because they have to get the payment over, allocate and then pay out. And in October 2021, today's date, there are 6, again, another 6 retirement cases where 3 have already been paid and we're waiting 3 payments, although these were only requested recently. Again, as has been said, if anyone does retire with an AVC fund, to ensure that they don't suffer financial hardship, we can pay out the standard benefits, so that would be the standard pension and any tax-free lump sum that they're entitled to, and then look to pay out the additional on the AVC once that's received. The manager has said that she does think there's been an improvement in processing the payment requests, and this is where kind of most of the complaints were being made. There's definitely been a drop in member complaints, and she says she's come across member records where if there's been a delay in Prudential making payment, Prudential have paid compensation direct to members, which as per the report is £175. So employer work during this period, we've been working on 7 new academies and prime account schools and 6 new admission bodies. 5.3, just looking at the annual benefit statements, the deferred benefit statements, which were mentioned at the last meeting. There had been a delay in the March return being processed for Lincolnshire, which was immediately sorted out. This year's statements have been issued electronically through My Pension. Members who still prefer a paper copy, as we say, can opt out of any online communication and receive a paper copy. At the deadline day of 31st of August 2021 for issuing annual benefit statements and deferred benefit statements, we'd produced 98.7% of the Lincolnshire members who were eligible to receive one pension statement and 99.9% of the deferred benefit statements for eligible members. The remaining... Sorry.
I'll just stop you there, Lisa.
Yeah.
On the annual benefit statements, I mean, they're all electronic now.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how many people have actually tapped into the system and got their benefit statement? More to the point, are there a large number that have not accessed them at all?
That is potentially, yes, the case. We are just working on a report at the moment, and this has been asked by other clients as well, because obviously we're saying that we've produced however many % of the pension statements, but it's then trying to work out if members, are actually viewing them. So I think we've recently just got a report which I can pull off and send on, which shows when a member when they're registered and when the pension statement was issued. So it was created and when they last logged into My Pension. So on that, you can kind of work out that if they'd registered for My Pension in April and last logged on in June, that it's more than likely that they'd actually looked at the pension statement. However, it then also shows that they might have registered a while ago and then have not had any recent activity. Again, something that they're looking to do some additional work on, which we're going back to Civica, our UPM provider, is trying to look at the moment we can't determine what pages they have looked at when they've gone online. It's more than likely someone has logged on after the annual benefit statement's been produced, that they've looked at their annual benefit statement. It would seem more than likely that they have. But what we are looking to do is see if we can get it where we can actually see what actual pages a member did look at when they did log on.
And just to follow that up then, so let's say 40% have not looked and therefore, you know, not seen their benefit statement. Are you going to do anything with that? Are you going to send a copy through the post or what? Are you just ignoring it?
I don't think we're ignoring it. It's not that we're ignoring it. We're just spending a lot of time trying to encourage members to sign up to My Pension. You know, giving them the benefit that there is their pension statement available to view, and really just spending the time through the newsletters. So we've got an active, deferred pensioner newsletter for Lincolnshire due out soon. So again, that the main feature on that is about signing up for My Pension, and also changing as literature that's going out to members with putting additional information in about My Pension on new starter letters that go out, welcome letters, and on the retirement information and estimate, anything really where we send out some kind of communication and letting them know about My Pension, and that that is where the documents in the future are going to be stored.
Okay, thank you.
5.4, no audits were undertaken within this period. Staffing, we are nearing the end of a big recruitment campaign to replace staff who retired or left, as well as recruiting into new posts under the revised structure. And details of the appointments will be provided at the next meeting once we've filled all positions. We do have 2 new fire clients who've joined from the 1st of July, Northamptonshire and Cambridgeshire Fire. And this will bring the total number of fire authorities under our administration to 23. Current technical issues were attached on Appendix B. And 7 on the web registrations, which obviously falls in line with what we're talking about with the annual benefit statements. The numbers there were produced at the time and that the report was produced. And I have got some updated figures, just as that was again a question that was raised on web registration. Would it be useful to have a comparison? So on those figures that were produced there since this was run, as of September, the active members registrations are now 7,341, deferred members 5,626, and pensioner members 5,008. So the numbers are increasing. Maybe we would like to encourage and would hope that those figures would increase a lot more over a period of time. And as I say, as communications that are going out, are all mentioning My Pension. So we're hoping to see a positive increase within those figures over the next few months. And again, a big push would go out again next year when we start producing next year's annual benefit statements as well. Also, with regards to active members, deferred and pensioner members are a little bit harder to contact because obviously that's our direct contact with them, and there's no employer contact. For active members, we are asking employers if they can also promote signing up to My Pension as well. And I know some of our other clients have sent out global emails to some of their bigger employers to ask them if they'll encourage their membership to sign up to My Pension, to try and get these figures higher and to try and get people engaging with My Pension, as that is going to be our forum for information going forward. Details of the shared service budget. I know that there's a question on that to explain the significant differences between the 2021-22 budget and forecast on the employees and internal recharge lines. I have got an update from our head of finance. Hopefully this will answer the question, and I apologise if it doesn't. This is the information I've been given. But I'm quite happy to go back and obviously come back with additional information if needed. So the new forecasts are correct. We have moved support services such as IT, finance, service development out of the pension admin budget. Therefore, there is a reduction to the total salaries and some small reductions in other costs. The reduction in salaries showed the value of support staff moved out of the pension admin. On the same part, pension admin needs to be recharged at the value of the support services used by pension admin, and this is reflected in the new charge of the 1,754. The budget credit of 784 represent the old recharge for support costs to investment management before we moved the support services out of pension admin. And then the net increase of 190,000 represents the increase in the shared service members.
I just, Jerry, yeah, I asked a question on that. Clearly, I saw you answer the committee this morning, which obviously wasn't right. But so basically, it's a contra between the two lines, then, isn't it? Because employees couldn't be right as just based on headcount. Because last year it was 5.3 million, this year it's 3.6. So it's obviously something else. So it's obviously just a move to the internal recharge line. Yeah. So there's obviously been a switch of some of the.
Yes, sorry, apologies. I hadn't realised on the committee this morning.
I saw the committee meeting this morning, and you were saying it was people not being recruited, but it couldn't have just been that because it's 1.6 million, 1.7 million less than last year. So, but I understand now. Yeah, thank you.
Apologies.
It's all right. Thank you.
On to section 9 on the awards. I think there's a common theme that we're kind of going in for these awards on most occasions. I think at the last meeting we said we were being shortlisted by pensions age in 3 categories, and winners were announced in July just after the last meeting. We didn't win any of those awards. But they all did go to big private sector funds. But we were pleased that we had gained some recognition and had been shortlisted within those categories. We've now been shortlisted by the European Pensions Age under 3 categories as well. And these winners will be announced at the ceremony in London on the 20th of October. So we'll be able to give you an update at the next meeting. And thank you very much for that's it for me, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Lisa. Any questions?
Yeah, can I, Lisa, can I move you a little bit further on into the report about life certificates? Can I ask you about that part of the report, or is that something for another day?
I think the life certificates are being covered within the internal audit.
Is that where we are on? Is that on the internal audit report?
It is, Dave.
Sorry,
yeah.
I'm skipping on. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I do have an answer, but if I believe I can give it at that point in time, if that's okay.
I'll come back to it. I was thinking it's further on in this report. I'll wait until we get to it. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
I do have one. Can I just ask you, Lisa, just what for clarification?
Mm-hmm.
If I go back to annual benefit statements.
Yeah.
If I pick the deferred benefit statements as an example, 99.9% of all deferred benefit statements have been issued. All I'm just trying to clarify is that I know it might be historically slightly off, but there's in excess of 25,000 deferred members as at in the report.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that 25,000, give or take, statements have been issued?
Yeah.
So
of those that are eligible to receive a statement, 99.9% have been issued.
So the overall number was 25,575. So however they've been issued, that's how many have been prepared?
Yeah, I mean, if there's any that have been blocked or because we've got lost contact and we haven't done it or anything, so it would be 99.9% have been produced for those eligible to receive one. So we you know, there's no problems with the records and it's not producing one.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Anything else? Kim, anything?
Sorry, my computer's on a go slow. No, as far as I know, the people that were asking me about the pension statements have all got them, and I've got mine as well now, so it's all good.
Right, thank you, Kim. So, recommendation is the board notes the report. Happy with that? Agreed, thank you. Let's move on. Thank you very much for that, Lisa. Temporary bank accounts. And I guess this is you, Lisa.
It is. Yep, I will cover that. Sorry, I'll just get my report up. Yep, so this report updates the board on a number of temporary bank accounts created by West Yorkshire Pension Fund to hold monies due to the beneficiaries of the scheme. It's something that I think we've covered over the last few meetings. So just really to update you on the salient point. Point 2, lost contact pensioner defers. The number of temporary deposit accounts held for this category of members has decreased to 49 from 60, which was reported at the last pensions board. And then there's a current updated figure of what's held there now. It's reduced down to 49. The post-2014 preserve refunds. So the number of temporary deposits account held for this category of members has increased to 274 from 201. It's an increase of 73 reported to the last time we attended the pensions board, and it's expected that because we have more and more members who are now coming up to their 5-year deadline. However, the National Technical Group has contacted the Scheme Advisory Board to request a change in the LGPS Regulations 2013 to remove the requirement for a refund to be paid within 5 years, and we're still awaiting a response. There is a detailed breakdown of the number of accounts opened and closed in appendix there. Members not claiming the benefits, I think, as again has been discussed before, but you know, a number of temporary bank accounts relate to members not claiming their benefits for unknown reasons. This could be because they believe that having this pension paid would impact on any benefits that they're claiming are due, and that they believe that the pension is too small to be genuine. If persistent attempts to contact the beneficiary fails and a personal visit usually resolves the issue and the account is closed and balances are paid. However, personal visits are currently on hold due to the pandemic and continue to be so. I think once we get back into where members of our staff from our pensioner services team are allowed or feel they can now go back out and visit members who are failing to reply to any letters or information that we're sending out to them to claim the pension. I think we'll see either an increase or decrease, whichever, on ensuring that the accounts are closed and we actually make payment of those benefits. Tracing is still continuing, at least on an annual basis, to review the bank accounts and carry out any further traces to see if a member can be located, and this can be through the National Fraud Initiative. And we do use online tracing agencies where pensions are a reasonable amount, and then this cost is deductible from the benefits payable because we've had to pay to trace them. So in conclusion, payments into a temporary bank account were made when all tracing options are exhausted, and means that the fund have discharged its liability, and the member is then not faced with an unauthorised tax charge if they did then eventually claim these benefits. The accounts are regularly monitored and closed where members are located or confirmation received that they have died. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions? No. Kim, any questions?
No, thank you.
Thanks for that then, Lisa. So the recommendation is the board note the report. Thank you. So item 9, transfers out. I think this is you, Lisa, as well.
It is. I've got to run. Sorry, just get pull this one up. So we've just asked to supply a report on transfers out. So this report updates the board on the West Yorkshire Pension Fund transfers out system. So the background to this is when a member ceases to be employed, they can choose to transfer the pension benefits into a new scheme, either one provided by their new employer or their own scheme run by a private provider. The transfer value is an actuarial value of a member's benefits paid to an alternative pension scheme. So looking at point 2, transfer out quote request, inquiry forms or request letters are received for a transfer value quotation, and they're either received from a member, a new pension provider or a financial advisor, depending on which route a member's going down. We do check the eligibility for a transfer value is checked in accordance with the current working instructions, and if they're eligible to transfer, West Yorkshire Pension Fund will supply a quotation to either the member or the new scheme or the new provider. Point 2.3, if we have a request from a financial advisor, this is where we do additional checks. So if a request for a transfer out quote is received from a financial advisor, a check is made to ensure authorisation from the member to provide details to this individual or firm as being received. We also make a check with the Financial Conduct Authority, who regulates these firms and individuals to check that they're providing financial advice. The FCA maintain a register that shows all those firms and individuals who've been authorised to conduct regulated activities, and they also have a section listing firms and individuals to avoid, so we can look on both sections and to check that we're happy that the person or firm that are requesting this information fall within the correct category. If the request is from an overseas financial advisor, these can be checked in the International Organisation of Securities Commission's Investor Alerts list. Once we're fully satisfied with the checks, the details are sent to their financial advisor. However, if we're not satisfied with the checks, so we don't believe they're on the correct list, or we just believe that, you know, we're not happy that the request has come in, then the transfer value is, so we still do the transfer value, but it's sent direct to the member. It's sent with an explanation of why we've sent it to them and not the financial advisor. And a letter is also sent to the financial advisor to explain that's what that we've sent the details to the member and why we've done that. Once we get to the point in 2.6 of the member electing to transfer, if the member elects to transfer out, they must supply a financial advice confirmation form, and it has to be completed by the financial advisor and also the member. If 1, the member has a deferred benefit entitlement, 2, the member has been able to access benefits flexibly from the new scheme, and the total cash equivalent transfer value of all the members' LGPS rights in England and Wales is more than 30,000. A check is also made that the advisor has completed the form is regulated to do so by checking the Financial Services Register. And then again, another final check on top of that is that before the transfer out is paid, we are required to record which member of staff within West Yorkshire Pension Fund has conducted these checks, and when, plus evidence from the advisor's firm or company, are on the Financial Services Register. So if anyone looked at on a member's record who had a transfer out, there would be details of the staff who'd conducted the checks, plus evidence of the advisor was on the Financial Services Register. At point 3 on internal audit, an internal audit of transfers out was conducted by Bradford Council in October 2020. The audit focused on the key risks associated with the transfer out system and the controls which were expected to be in place to effectively manage those risks. Audit's opinion was that the control of identified risks in the system is excellent, and that the audit review has determined that the identified risks are being effectively managed and the control environment is expected and supports the achievement of key business objectives. Point 4, in conclusion, we as administrator have 2 main aims for members who wish to transfer out: to only make a valid, recognised transfer, and to help put the member in a position to make an informed choice. Scheme members do have a responsibility to protect themselves from scams, but the West Yorkshire Pension Fund also has a duty to make sure they are aware of the consequence of falling victim to scams. We believe we have a robust procedure in place to ensure we only pay transfers out to appropriately registered schemes, and that we are able to they are able to accept the transfer. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Lisa. Any questions? Lisa, just have West Yorkshire Pension Fund experienced any scams? Has any member come back and said, I wish I hadn't done that, or?
I believe I've seen that there's been an IDRP for a member who believed that they shouldn't have been allowed to transfer out, but all the checks had been done, and it was agreed that, you know, all the appropriate checks had been done and that the transfer out had been paid appropriately. I'm not aware, and I'm not within that section, but I do know within the service centre they do take it very, very seriously. So when we do get requests from members or from financial advisors, and we tend to spot things with financial advisors if they constantly are asking for the transfer out value. So we're constantly getting calls or emails asking, then it tends to be a bit of a red flag that there maybe is not something quite right, and that would obviously stop us proceeding with that transfer out to that particular firm or advisor, and we would be in contact with the member, and sometimes members do get quite upset because they feel that we're holding on to the money and we're not willing to transfer it. So you know, whilst we're ever trying to protect them, it then can give us a flip side that they think that we're not willing to pay the money out and to transfer out, whereas actually we're doing our best to protect the member going forward.
Thank you. Kim, anything from you?
No, nothing, thank you.
No. So the board happy to note the report? Yep, thank you. Right, thank you, Lisa. I think we can give you a rest now.
Thank you.
Item 10, which are employer monthly submissions, which I assume is Claire.
It is, thank you. So this is the standard quarterly update on late and incorrect employer submissions, and the report today covers the first quarter of 21-22. The number of late payments and data submission are set out in the table on the top of page 154. As you can see, there's generally good compliance from employers. The area of poorest performance continues to be the submission of data returns, but there are no specific concerns that we want to bring to the board's attention. Table 2 sets out the fines issued during the quarter, and as you can see, there's just been one. And I'm very happy to take any questions on the report today.
Any questions? No? Lisa, any questions? Sorry. Kim?
No, not on this one, thank you.
This one. Right, note the report. At this stage, wait for the next quarter. I think you're all aware that I, wrote as yes.
Claire. Sorry, Claire. All I was saying is, looking, the report shows quite a good picture. That was all I was saying. Or I'm not suggesting it will next month.
Claire, you know that letter that I wrote to Sam, and Roger Phillips responded and said it was being referred to a committee. Do you know whether anything that committee was supposed to meet in September? Shall I chase, or will you chase, or Joe chase?
We can happily chase that one up just to see if they've got any comments that they wanted to feedback from that, and we can bring those to the next. Well, we can share with them with the board or bring to the next board meeting, depending on what the content is.
Yeah, well, if it's simple, just share it with the board.
Yep.
I mean, I did write to the lady at the
MHCLG as was.
Who just acknowledged it.
Yes.
Yeah. But that, I mean, it was what's his name? Who's the secretary of SAB?
Bob Holloway.
But yeah, Bob said send one to her as well. Okay. Right, so we're noting the report and no further action at this stage. So item 11, annual report and accounts. Mazars.
Yep, that's back to me. Thank you very much. The report today brings an update from the fund's external auditor on progress on the annual accounts report. The draft annual report and accounts were presented to the board in July, and as was explained at that meeting, the fund was still outstanding a number of 31st of March asset valuations for unquoted assets, including alternatives, infrastructure and private equity. In response to a question received prior to the meeting from Jerry, those valuations are now all received, but they do take a significant period of time to come to us because part of the valuation information is based on audited accounts for the underlying investments, and they can take anything from 3 to 6 months to be prepared. So you're looking at periods from June to September to get that data.
That's a separate question. I understand the reason for the delay then, but surely in some cases there won't be an answer. Surely some of the accounts are actually year ends of after October. You know, it could be any time. It could be 12 months from. Do you know what I mean? There must be cases where the accounts haven't been done. If you know what I mean. So how can they get values on those ones?
The approach that is set out in the guidance is that valuations are prepared on a set of accounts as at whatever date they have their year end or quarter end. They are then rolled forward for cash flows from that point in time. So the accounts that we prepare initially for the 31st of March will be based primarily on 31st of December, maybe some 30th of September valuations from the prior year rolled forward with our cash flows. What the auditor demands and what we review is from that date where we receive any 31st of March valuations, that we take those values that we had and then compare them with the actual 31st of March. So what we've ended up with by today is all of those 31st of March valuations have been received where they're prepared, and in the majority of cases there's only a very, very small number of funds which haven't got audited statements at the 31st of March. So they're all now incorporated.
But those ones where they haven't are based on previous accounts with cash flows since then, I suppose. Yeah. If they've not got 31st of March accounts, they must be based on previous dated accounts with cash flow updates, sort of thing.
Yeah. But the vast majority will have or have got 31st of March, just on the basis that a number of the funds have quarterly audited accounts which they use for valuation purposes, just because of the size and magnitude of them. So they're all in, and over the summer we've reviewed those, and they've added just under £34 million to the asset value in the accounts, as was seen by the board in July. Attached to Appendix A is the External Auditor's Progress Report, and we met with the audit team earlier in the week, and they've confirmed that they've completed their work on the pension fund accounts. The auditors did not highlight any issues of management override of controls or internal control weaknesses. And their report covers the movement in unquoted asset valuations at sections 4 and 6, as I've mentioned. The external auditor acknowledges that these are purely timing of information adjustments, and they don't relate to any information missed by the fund at a period in time. However, audit standards require that any adjustments from draft reports to final are reported. It's anticipated that the external auditor will give their opinion on the pension fund accounts in November when they're issuing the opinion for the County Council. And once this has been issued, the accounts will be published in the annual report and issued to all relevant stakeholders. I'm very happy to take any questions on the report.
Do you want to say anything, Andrew, at this stage, about the 30th of November as opposed to the 30th of September?
Yeah, happy to add some context and maybe reiterate what I said to the Pensions Committee this morning about the process. So I think it was Steve Larter on the committee who noted an article this week that said that the public sector audit appointments had announced that only 9% of council audits had been signed off by the 30th of September date. Clearly, we are one of them. We are naturally, as a council, very disappointed that ours hasn't been signed off, cited by Mazars around two key issues around COVID and also lack of staff capacity, essentially, which is the reasons for it, and that is generally being cited as the reasons for other councils. Just to feedback again to members of the board that we were at audit committee a fortnight and a bit ago, and that committee was very robust in its feedback to the auditors about their disappointment as well, in terms of the sort of the late in the day announcement that they weren't going to be signed. I'll hold it there, and if there's any further comments to come back on, I shall do so.
How long have we got Mazars for?
So we're about to go through another process. I might have to ask Michelle to double check the date. I think it's till 2023. I think. Is that right? Is that correct? Yeah, I'm getting nods. The process is quite protracted. Basically, what we've got coming next is a decision for the audit committee and then council as to whether they want to be part of the national procurement process again that is conducted through public sector audit appointments, and that has to happen before March 2022. So yeah, it's 2023. You lose track of the years. I think the actual principles behind the procurement and that process are still sound, really, because you're buying in bulk. You're getting the efficiency of scale that sort of arrangement provides. We've used the opportunity of various surveys that they've undertaken over the last year or so, and it's not just PSAA themselves, other things like that CIPFA have conducted, for example, around emphasising the need that the audit market needs capacity for this to work, or it isn't ever going to. There might be other mitigations around sign-off dates and what have you. Because the sign-off date this year was imposed by the government, and it's a different one to the one that was this time last year, all because of the COVID pandemic. So the reasons cited by the audit firms as COVID as an issue, is valid to a degree, but then the whole sector, whether that's local government, the audit firms, and then central government, need to come up with an appropriate process that works. Albeit it is clear that there isn't enough capacity within the audit market at the moment to do these all on time.
And presumably there's not enough capacity because the fees have been dumbed down, so the likes of KPMG, PwC, etc. have walked away.
Yes, certain national firms have walked away from it. Claire referred to the meeting that we had earlier this week with our audit engagement team, and there were numerous examples cited on there that as a result of that, I guess, the swamping of the pressure within audit teams of all of the work that they've got to do, because it's not just local government, it's health, and it is a steady treadmill. People are taking career choices now to step out of audit jobs that they would have normally enjoyed 3 years ago, and that is being cited. The county council say that to a certain degree around people taking taking stock of their careers, and you hear about this great resignation in the press. It's not quite as stark as that, but people are taking stock. Michelle quote losing about 120 years of experience from the team in retirements over the last, and that's just 4 people, isn't it? Over the last 6 months. So it is a real issue, but people do retire, don't they, and go and do other stuff, and you react and deal with it accordingly, don't you? So,
at Roger's point, isn't it the case that people like PwC and KPMG don't quote because the fees, or they haven't got the they must have the expertise, I guess, but because I remember last time the tender was pretty limited, wasn't it? There wasn't many firms, I didn't think, who were involved in the process, as I remember. Or
so the vast majority of the local government audit market is covered by 3 providers. So it's Mazars, Ernst Young, and Grant Thornton. We previously had KPMG in the previous round, and I don't think they've got any contracts this time around. From what I'm aware.
I think it's fair to say, Jerry, that they've walked away because the fees have been reduced so much. I mean, if you recall, I don't know, it was last year or the year before, we said that to audit a scheme for 2.6 billion for 19k was ridiculous. So, to some extent, the public sector audit appointments board is partly to blame. I mean, there was that Tony Redmond review, which the guy from Newark kicked out. Robert Jenrick, he just ignored it. So I guess the question is, what can we do as a board to help you, to help the council? I mean, if I'm more than happy to take anyone on, as you will probably realise, be that, I mean, Sitford, I wouldn't take them on. I'd just ask for some help. But I think the chief exec is trying to do all he can. And I mean, it's a regular feature, as you will know, in public finance about audit. But if there's anything we can do, then, I'm more than happy to try and help.
So I think, like it was before with the prudential issue, I think this might be one where the collective voice is useful as well. So again, I think it's fair to say that myself and my counterparts, the regular emails that come amongst the county treasurers on a almost daily basis, this has been right at the top of the hot topic list. I talked about professional pride this morning, about having your accounts signed off on time, and you can replicate that across the 30 plus other members that are on that email chain as well. Everybody feels it because it's something that you take professional pride in terms of getting your accounts signed off on time. So I suspect like pensions will be spending a bit of time on this in Warwick in a few weeks' time, and it might be that to see what the collective view is on next steps on that one, but also as well, I'd probably advocate us writing something, whether it's a joint letter from yourself, Chair, Councillor Strengle, maybe Councillor Hill as the portfolio holder for finance, and myself as Section 151 officer as well, about the current state of affairs, because something has to give somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I said this morning, you've got your professional pride, and I agree with that. There's also stewardship to the public, and I mean, something's going to go wrong. Probably something has gone wrong. So in terms of the tactics, then we'll let you go to the SCT again, see what the collective view is. I'm more than happy to kind of put my signature to a joint letter with Eddie, you, and Martin Hill, if we can do anything. I mean, Martin, to some extent, dare I say, ought to be doing something kind of, through his political network, because this is just totally unsatisfactory. We'll leave it at that at this stage. I mean, I've probably got another idea, but I'm conscious this has been recorded, so better be careful. Right, are there any other comments, questions on this one? Kim, anything?
No, I think you've covered it all, Roger.
Okay, all right. So we'll note the report on the basis that Andrew's going to take it to the SCT, and we'll see what emerges from there, and we may take some action. Okay, thanks for that. Thanks, Claire. What are we on to now? Item 12, training needs. You introduce this.
It is. This item is the board's normal opportunity to discuss training needs and review any training attended during the last 3 months, and consider if there are any further areas that you would like covered in the future. For the first time since the pandemic started, attached to the report are conference notes produced by Hyman Robertson for the face-to-face LGC Investment Pension Summit, which was held at the beginning of September. I won't say any more, but I'll hand over for the board to discuss training that they've attended and to comment on any future training needs.
Right, any training attended? Who's going first?
Yes, I attended the recent Barnet Waddingham autumn seminar. It was a online session, and it I nearly completed it. I didn't quite get the afternoon. I nearly didn't. There was an issue with my decorator that got in the way, but that's another matter. But
it wasn't the decorator; it was his COVID.
Well, he got COVID. Yes, he had to leave with COVID. Yes, which was a bit awkward. So I'd missed the last hour, but it covered. Realistically, the first session was the majority of the session. I would suggest it covered all current issues, and it was quite interesting, if I may say, without going into the detail. But I like to keep up to date.
Yes, I attended the same autumn seminar and saw it through. I didn't have COVID issues with my decorator, but yeah, there was a governance section, which she's very good. She does a lot of these sessions. Anne Marie, somebody, I mean, she's very good, to be fair. The pension security section, I don't even for that. That wasn't quite so good. There wasn't the level of expertise on that section, but the governance, Anne-Marie did an hour and a half on governance issues and all the various issues around, and that was very good. The one thing that did come up was that these have been run by Barnett, Waddingham and SIPFA previously, and SIPFA are ducking out. Sorry, not ducking out. They're not doing them in future. I don't know if that's a funding issue or a relationship with Barnett, Waddingham issue or what, but that was quite. Gerard Moore, I think it is, who's I think is he the chair of SIPFA or something? He's senior guy in SIPFA, and they're not doing it with Barnett Waddingham in future anyway. So I don't know that was relevant. But anyway, the governance session was very good by Anne-Marie Lady. Yeah. So
are they doing them on their own then? SIPFA?
I think Barnett Waddingham are doing them on their own.
Oh,
not SIPFA, I don't think. No. So anyway,
I don't know. That was an income stream for them. Kim, have you been here, there, and anywhere?
No, I haven't, but I am booked to go on. I only did 2 days of the fundamental course, so I am booked to go in next month to the final day in Leeds. So that's a face-to-face one.
Oh, right. Well, yeah, I'm sure you'll enjoy that. I mean, I've done one or two things. I mean, I went to Borders to Coast conference. I mean, I know Eddie raved about it today, but you know, I mean, it was okay. It was okay. Let's just leave it at that. I think if you wanted to understand the range of asset classes and what have you, the two guys who were talking about investing in China who were based in Hong Kong were quite fascinating, actually. So good in parts. I've attended quite a bit on ESG, actually, so much so it's draining me. And the Pension Schemes Act 2021, which I think bites more on the private sector than the public sector. Probably one of the best ones I've been to is the Pension Trustees Circle, which is a kind of a Sunday night and Monday. So own risk assessment for pension scheme, practical considerations and lessons from insurers, actually. And that was pretty good. And there were quite a few speakers on that. And then climate risk reporting, which will come to us all. I mean, it's already in for the private sector for schemes over 5 billion now from 1st of October, and will be for schemes over 1 billion from 2023. And I guess local authorities will be involved soon. And then infrastructure investing. So that was probably one of the best ones I've attended. But I guess you'll see them all on my form when I send it in. Are there any kind of topics that you particularly want to cover, or are you prepared just to wait for them to come along?
I mean, I'm aware, Claire, you're arranging for a full-day training, aren't you, in February, which will cover, no doubt, well, I know it's going to cover valuation, isn't it? And
yeah.
So
yeah, the session in February will cover the valuation in March, April 2022, and will also be an opportunity to review the fund's responsible and investment beliefs, because we're conscious, I think, from the training in September that they've been in place for a number of years and are probably due a refresh. And actually, there's been quite a change in the committee during that time as well. So an opportunity to look at that, and Hymans will facilitate that piece of work for us.
Well, I think that would be an interesting discussion on investment beliefs, judging from the comments this morning.
Have we got a date for that yet, Claire?
There isn't a date yet, but we'll get that into the diary as soon as possible so that you can plan around that and make sure that you're free for it. It's already been raised with me this afternoon, so yeah, we'll pick that up sooner rather than later.
I've already raised that, Kim, because it might affect certain cricket matches abroad, if you get my gist.
If only we could all go to Australia and New Zealand, that'd be great.
They're going to Barbados. I mean, they're going to this after Australia. You know, when we talk about ESG and what have you in this training session and the investment beliefs, I mean, I don't know whether is that going to be an external speaker, because I had a fascinating presentation about you need an ESG kind of training session, an implementation plan, and an ESG policy.
Certainly, yeah, we will be using the investment consultant to help with that piece of work, to facilitate the discussion and to provide some information as well for that.
Right, and Barnett Waddingham will presumably be doing the.
Yeah, and then
tell them to make it exciting, will you?
We're seeing them shortly to put together a timetable for the valuation. So yeah, we'll be picking up on the content of that at that point as well.
Right. So, anything else on this one? So in terms of the recommendations, we've got requested to share information, which we've done. There was any conference and training feedback, which we've done. Any further training? Well, I think we said we'll wait for the February session. Okay, happy with that? Thank you. So item 13. Oh, hang on a minute. Consideration of exempt information. Have I got to read all this out, Robert? Oh, work programme. Sorry, work programme.
That's me.
Programme. Sorry, Claire.
So this item's the board's normal opportunity to discuss the future work plan. The current work plan can be found at Appendix A to the report. And if we just look ahead to the next meeting, we've got normal quarterly items on the fund update, stewardship update, admin update, and employer monthly submissions. We've also got the twice yearly update on the pension regulator data scores. And in January, we'll also cover the external auditor's outcome report, although the bulk of that has really been picked up today in terms of their progress report. During the course of the meeting, I haven't captured anything else that you would like to pick up in January or at future meetings. So as it stands, that's what the agenda will look like for that meeting.
Just as I'll just make mention, we had quite a discussion about adding something to the risk register, didn't we, earlier on? Is that covered in our work plan? We usually look at risk register at some point. I'm just trying to see it in here. Is it?
I think it'll form part of the pension fund update, won't it?
Will it? Right. Sorry.
Sorry, I can't turn my mic on until you turn yours off. Yeah, so the risk register is reviewed annually with the opportunity to see the full register, and that's every July. But any changes which are made are brought to the next quarterly meeting. So we'll take that to the Pensions Committee and back to the board in the December-January papers with the split of those meetings. So yeah, that will be on there as part of the fund update paper.
I think it's fair to say, Claire, that if anything else arises between now and the next meeting, then you and I will pick it up.
Yeah, it isn't fixed from this point in time, but as far as possible, everything that can be on there is.
Just one comment. I noticed we did transfers out today. Is that just an annual report, because it's not on the next three? I'm not saying it should be on. I'm just questioning really whether it's an annual report or.
No, I think required? It was something that I asked for, Jerry, because transfers out have been in the news, scams and what have you, and the regulator's pretty tough on this, and clearly West Yorkshire have got a pretty good system. So review the future work programme, highlighting activity for inclusion in the work programme. So we've done that. Okay. So consideration of exempt information. Do you want me to read all that out, Robert, or? We'll take it as read then, shall we? Thank you. I don't think anyone is listening in, are they? So let's go on to item 14 then, the investment consultant tender and appointment recommendation. Well, been made.